Jetzt möchte ich aber den Festvortrag, den diesjährigen, einleiten. Der Freitagvormittag ist traditionellerweise jetzt schon einige Jahre eben dem Festvortrag als Metaebene des Programms gewidmet. Ich darf ganz kurz die bisherigen Redner in Erinnerung rufen. Adolf Krischanitz, Hermann Tschech, Boris Potrecker, wichtige Figuren aus Wien, wichtige Figuren der Architekturszene, Stefano Boeri dann aus Mailand im Jahr 2015 und in den letzten beiden Jahren Max Rieder und Dietmar Feichtinger wieder aus der österreichischen Architekturszene, auch mit einem Bogen nach Paris. Die Einladung von Kristiaan Borret hat jetzt einen besonderen Bezug zum Programm. Er wird morgen auch Gast der Talkrunde sein und es gibt heuer einen Schwerpunkt Architektur aus Belgien respektive Flandern, eben morgen am Samstag mit 2 Vorträgen. Dieses Land, diese Region ist derzeit ein Hotspot der Architekturentwicklung, genauer seit rund 20 Jahren. Und was lag also näher für den Schwerpunkt ausländischer Büros, nun dieses Land auszuwählen? Vor rund 20 Jahren wurde die Position des Stadtbaumeisters in Flandern eingeführt bzw. auch neu definiert und diese hat sich seit den Jahren damals beständig weiterentwickelt. Kristiaan Borret hat einige Jahre diese Funktion in Antwerpen ausgeübt und ist jetzt Stadtbaumeister für die Region Brüssel Hauptstadt. Die Stadt bzw. Metropole stand bereits in den Festvorträgen 2016 und 2017 von Turn On im Mittelpunkt und morgen wird bei der erwähnten Talkrunde die Frage nach Strategien und Visionen der Stadtplanung gestellt, damit auch nach Instrumenten der Stadtplanung, und das ist gewissermaßen die Fortsetzung des Festvortrages jetzt im Anschluss. Kristiaan Borret wird Ihnen also seine Visionen vorstellen, und zwar unter dem prägnanten Titel Cities to Love, Architecture in City Planning. Ganz kurz Angaben zu seiner Biografie. Er war 8 Jahre lang Stadtbaumeister von Antwerpen und hat diese Funktion eben seit 2015, also doch schon 3 Jahre für Brüssel inne. Er ist ausgebildeter Bauingenieur und Architekt, studierte daneben aber auch Philosophie und Politikwissenschaften sowie Stadtplanung. Neben dieser disziplinenübergreifenden Ausbildung ist ein besonderes Anliegen die Verbindung unterschiedlicher Ebenen, also die Verbindung von Theorie und Praxis, von öffentlichem Sektor und privatem Sektor, von Politik und Design und Architektur und Stadtplanung. Ja, ich darf ihn jetzt bitten. Welcome to Vienna, Kristiaan Borret. The stage is yours and I'm curious what you will be saying in the next few minutes.
Good morning to all of you. I would like to thank you for the invitation and thank Margit Lama especially, of course, for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. I'm always glad to tell about Brussels and tell about Belgium, but I'm also happy to be here to learn from you. I think it's very useful to exchange. I would like to begin with expressing my love for the city, for that way of settlement, social settlement. Praise to the city, praise to the urbanity. I'm a city dweller, I live in the city, I work in the city, I love the city, I'm an urbanite, and I'm happy to be it. But it has not always been easy to be so happy and to be so optimistic. When I was a student in the 1980s, cities were problematic things. People were leaving the cities. You had many derelict neighborhoods. You had many buildings that were empty. And so nowadays, we are witnessing a kind of renaissance of the city. There has been a lot of renewal, urban renovation. Yes, gentrification too. There has been a lot of demographic growth the last years especially. So in my city in Brussels, and even more in your city in Vienna, of course, there is a huge demographic growth. In Brussels, it's something like 15,000 people, new inhabitants per year. I refuse to consider this demographic growth as a problem. I really consider it, looking backward to my student years, where people were leaving the city. Now that the cities are flourishing, I really refuse to consider it as a problem, and I consider it as really as an opportunity, even if the opportunity might be challenging. I think it brings us, this demographic growth, to the essence of urbanity, and that is density, proximity, mixity. It's being exposed to what is strange, what is the otherness. It's what Richard Sennett calls the exposure to the otherness. That doesn't mean that you have to engage in everything, but in the city there should be a kind of tolerance to what is not like us. And so the city, the mixity of the city, the diversity of the city is also about liberty. Stadtluft macht frei is your wonderful sentence. Now, in many cases, when our cities are growing in inhabitants, it is not anymore about growing in surface. So if you look to Brussels, you could talk about Brussels, or you could see Brussels as a point on its own, as a city on its own, in a kind of pure landscape, while we know that, especially in that part of Europe, it doesn't make any sense. You should consider Brussels like this, as just one point in a kind of continuous carpet of urbanity. There has been massive urban sprawl in Belgium the last century, but even before, since the medieval age, in this part of Europe, cities with a proper identity are only something like 50 kilometers, there's something like 50 kilometers between each other. So when I was working in Antwerp for 8 years, I was commuting, I was still living in Brussels, and I was commuting every day. So that means in this kind of Zwischenstadt, in this kind of continuous urbanity, this kind of suburbanity, peri-urbanity, semi-urbanity, Brussels is just one built-up point. And that's why architecture is becoming important. Because I think in this kind of European situation, in many cases, growth of the city, renaissance of the city, renewal of the city is not anymore about expansion of the city. Because everywhere there is already something existing. It's about transformation of the city, transformation of what is already existing. We hardly have any greenfields left in Belgium. There is always a context, and you should take that context into account. So, and that's why architecture is more and more becoming on the foreground, I think so, in city planning. That's why architecture is more, and architectural quality is more and more important in city planning. We are living in the era of expansion of transformation rather than expansion, and that is why urbanism has changed too. Much of city planning was abstract, two-dimensional zoning plans, large scale, long term. It has changed because perhaps this kind of approach could work for expansion, for greenfields, for new areas, for Chinese cities now, but in many European cities it doesn't work anymore. We need another kind of urbanism that is much more specific, that is taking into account the existing context, that is dealing with what is there, that is providing made-to-measure solutions, and that's exactly the competence and the scale and the scope of architecture. So that's why I think that we really need the specificity and the sensitivity of architects more and more in city planning today. That is why good architecture in cities is even more important than ever. Now, let me tell you about this function of Bouwmeester, which is quite specific in Belgium and the Netherlands. You could say it's about my youth, it's about my young years, but because it's about Lego, constructing, and it's about Star Wars. You have the good ones and the bad ones, and you have to fight a bit, and so on. So Bouwmeester is really something special? Firstly, it's quite recent as a tradition. So in the 19th century, you had this word Bouwmeester already in the Netherlands and Belgium, but it was more like the architect, the chief architect of the city, who was building the buildings of the city. So today, the Bouwmeester is not building anymore. The Bouwmeester is not the head of the administration, of the planning office. The Bouwmeester is not the head of the building permit department, for instance. It's really something beside. In this new role, it's quite recent. So it was inspired by Dutch examples, but now in Belgium, it's more developed than in the Netherlands. So the first Bouwmeester was on the level of Flanders region, 1999, then Antwerp, very quickly after. Something in Wallonia, I made a hatch because it's something in between. It's a kind of cellule d'architecture, very much dedicated to good quality in architecture, but not having this kind of independent role. I will tell you later. Then Brussels in 2009, Charleroi in 2013. That's a funny thing because you know we are a country with two languages, Dutch and French. And so the official title of the Bouwmeester in Charleroi is Bouwmeester, or in fact, Bouwmeester. So for me now it's a French word. And then last year in Ghent also they installed the Bouwmeester. So be aware, it's spreading and it's coming southward. So it's coming close to you. A Bouwmeester doesn't build. So I'm not a practicing architect. No Bouwmeester in Belgium. There are more or less 10 Bouwmeesters now, Bouwmeesters in other cities. So if I'm telling you about Bouwmeester, I'm not telling you about me, but I'm telling you about the function. So never the Bouwmeester has been building. Sometimes it was a practicing architect who was appointed as a Bouwmeester, sometimes more an urban planner, sometimes, really like me, urban design, the scale in between planning and architecture. If you would summarize the role in one sentence, you could say the Bouwmeester supervises the quality of city development projects, in Brussels in this case, from an independent position. If we deconstruct it now, then supervising, it's a bit severe. In the office, we often make a joke that we are the police of architecture. So we try to be more ahead, to be more positive, not controlling, but stimulating. Really be there in the beginning of the process. That's more efficient because then you can change things and you can heighten the ambition. If you're there just before the building permit, mostly you just can say no, and then everyone is angry. So you should try to be more in the beginning of the process. It's not just about architecture. Cities are not just built by buildings. Cities are built by the constellations of buildings, open space, public space, and people living in it and using it. So it's about all domains. It's in Brussels. That means, in this case for me, in the Brussels capital region, so 19 municipalities, something like 1,000,003 inhabitants, and as well for public projects as private projects. And then the most important thing, perhaps, it's an independent position. So the Bouwmeester is appointed by the government, but is not linked politically to the government or to the coalition or to the political party of the minister-president or something like that. He's independent on the political level. And so he's not making part of the administration. So I have no general director or something like that above me. I'm not above him either. So the Bouwmeester is really hors cadre, besides, and that's the strength, because that means in this kind of typical segmented organization of large public administrations, it's not clear where you are, and that's an advantage, because that means you can really work in a kind of transversal way and unify, federate people, instead of being seen as one of them, or not one of us. So that's really important to play that independent position. There's another kind of independent position as well. So the Bouwmeester is paid to be critical. It's quite exceptional. And so that means you can be critical also towards the government. So if I would like, I could say in the newspaper that yesterday they took really another stupid decision. And then it might be interesting for your ego, because look what I dare to say, but at the end, in fact, you're losing impact. Because after a while, you won't be consulted anymore, they won't ask you, so the Baumeister is not compulsory to be consulted, and then you're losing impact. But if you're never critical, then you shouldn't apply for the job, because then you're just a flower pot for decoration. So in between, you should walking on the rope and try to find the nice equilibrium. I'm not working alone. There's a team of 15 people. A Baumeister is per mandate of 5 years. That's very healthy, so that regularly it's a new, fresh external view. And so there is a kind of public selection procedure. The Baumeister has to write a policy note, and I want to explain now to you some core tasks. And so the main ones are organizing design competitions, then doing research by design themselves. The Baumeister does it himself in the office, and then a system of quality chamber. So organizing competitions is the main thing. It's 50% of the job. So of course there is a European legislation, but in each country it's applied in a different way. I know that in the German-speaking countries it's quite well done, but in Belgium it was not like that. So many years ago you had really bad competitions. Most of the criteria were on the fee of the architect or on the budget, so not at all orienting towards quality. And so we are organizing a lot of competitions for public and private clients with a list of ambitions. So I will not explain all of them, but for instance, one of them is the fact that the architect's fee is fixed. So from the beginning, we say you will have, for instance, 12% of the construction budget. So that means afterwards in the final jury, the discussion is only on quality because the fee as a criterion has been neutralized. Another, it's always in 2 steps. So you can apply as a candidate and then you are selected for, or not selected for a second round, something like 5 candidates. The criteria for the first round are very low. Not very much, we don't, especially in the system of the Flemish Baumeister, there are hardly any selection criteria. That's quite important because it opens up the market. So you don't have to have built 3 swimming pools in order to be able or to be accepted for building a new swimming pool. So it means you have a lot of refreshment in the selection of architects. And so in Belgium, for all those years, it has been a help to give young officers, young architects, the opportunity to apply for large projects because there was not this selection system based on references. One more example, and that's about transparency. So we have more and more what we call open presentations. That means that 5 competitors are presenting their project, and the other competitors, they can assist, they can be there, they can follow what is presented. They should leave the room when the questions are posed. But it helps in bringing transparency, nothing to hide. It also helps in a kind of capacity building. Because I think, and that's the point to make here, that this 20 years of Bouwmeesters in Belgium has indeed advanced the quality of architecture in Belgium. Because of these systems, because of lowering the entrance, the access to public commissions, because of being open and transparent so that architects can learn from other architects, how they make their projects, how they present. So exactly by being open in many senses, there has been a kind of general rise of quality of architecture in Belgium. In Brussels, we organize 1 competition every 10 days, so it's quite a steep rhythm. Very small things, sometimes you wouldn't believe it's in Brussels, a small urban farm, sometimes very big. The new branch of the Centre Pompidou that will be built in the former Citroën garage in Brussels, and for which the jury is next Monday. In Flanders, with the open call system of the Flemish Bouwmeester, which is even more open as a public procedure system, there has been now more than 600 open calls since more or less 20 years. And so that has really been rising the quality of architecture in Belgium. And then this is the moment for also a moment of modesty, because Bouwmeesters have been playing a role in the quality of architecture. But of course, the quality of architecture in Belgium is mainly thanks to the architects who are doing good things, who are really making very interesting projects now. The Bouwmeesters are there to offer opportunities and to do a kind of matchmaking between the good architects and the good clients. So we should, as Bouwmeesters and all other kind of cultural institutions involved in quality of architecture, be modest too. Some more aspects that's on research by design. So in the Bouwmeester office, we make drawings ourselves too. So I think it is necessary that on the side of the public authority, there is also the capacity to draw, to make a project, to design, to make images. Because I hate it when in a political discussion about an urban plan, there is no map on the table, when there is no drawing on the table, when there is no image. These are the tools of our profession, and these should be involved in the political decision process as well. The city should be conceived not just in Word, in text, not just in Excel tables, not just in numbers and rentability, in square meters, but also in images. I think also it's necessary in a city to have some kind of official forum where quality is discussed. So it could be a quality chamber, could be in the Netherlands it's a welstandscommissie, in Zurich it's a bouwcollegium, where independent experts, together with people of the city administration and with some politicians, gather and discuss about the quality of the projects. This should be done ahead of the building permit process, because that's the moment when you can really make modifying a project. I think it's a role of the Bouwmeester to guarantee that it happens, because it doesn't always happen, and that it happens in a convenient way, in a professional way, in a transparent way. Because many of those talks in Brussels were happening in a restaurant or at a reception or bilateral without the other ones present. So I think it's good to have one coherent meeting, professional meeting, one official forum where the debate on quality of architecture is being done. We do a lot of communication. So we have a website and a Facebook and so on. So these were formal roles of a Bouwmeester. I think there are also some informal roles, more advising and policy. And so just to finish off, 3 teams, very shortly, that are very much at stake in Belgium, and that perhaps might be interesting in Vienna as well. So one team is what we call Beton Stop, stop urban sprawl, stop suburbanization. Very strong team for the Flemish Bouwmeester, because in Flanders you have a lot of urban sprawl. There's a kind of anti-urban tradition in Flanders against the city. People do not want to live in the city, they work in the city, they recreate in the city, they go to the cinema and the restaurants, and they commute. They use the car for using the city and then going to live in the green suburbs. That's not very well on sustainability, because it's consuming land and it's a lot of mobility problems. It's not very good for the city as well, because these people are not paying taxes in the city, but are using the city. So we should live more compact, more in the city. A second team is what I proposed as a new team on the political agenda in Antwerp. That is Labo 20. So we've been doing in Belgian cities a lot of urban renewal in 19th century neighborhoods, in workers' neighborhoods, in former industrial neighborhoods. But we can see now that there is a kind of 20th century belt of the city, which was built in the second half of the 20th century. Nothing to do with this kind of 19th century industrialization. But that needs renovation too. It's a kind of urban tissue that is very heterogeneous. That is something else than the traditional urban blocks of the 19th century city. And we need to invent tools to renew, to improve those areas as well. And the last theme, that's the one we are developing in Brussels now, is the idea of the productive city. This is an image along the canal in Brussels. For me, it's an extremely urban image. So that's really the city, that's really Brussels, that's really the canal. And the most urban thing on the image, that's the concrete factory. Because that's what we need in the city. Only in the cities there are a lot of projects, sites, so we will always need concrete. So making concrete is an urban activity. So we should keep it in the city. And so the point here, and these are my last words, the point here we want to make is that in many waterfront developments, new neighborhoods, vibrant new cities, and so on, we think each time that we've built a mixed city, but if you look closer, you can see that one function each time has been pushed out of the city, pushed to the periphery, or pushed to China, and that's productive activity. So the challenge in Brussels is to keep these kind of activities within the city and to combine, to mix them with new housing, new developments along the canal. Thank you.
Kristiaan, Borret, thank you very much for your programmatic speech at the beginning of this day. We will continue with the topic tomorrow on Saturday with Turn On Talk, going into some details concerning the visions and the instruments for city planning. Just one question, which is, I think, rather important, concerning your role at the Stadtbaumeister. I think your role has to be an inspiring role, hasn't it?
Yes, so as a Baumeister, you don't have power. You should try to have authority. That's something else. It's kind of soft power. So you always have to work by means of conviction. You cannot just decide yes or no. And so that means you have to develop an argumentation and that you have to use this argumentation to inspire the people and to convince the people. I must say also that a Baumeister is a kind of bridging function. So lots of the things that we are proposing are in fact also inspired by what architects are doing or what universities are proposing or what urban planners are thinking about. And then the Baumeister can work as a kind of collection point that brings it to the political agenda. So it's very much, I like very much in my job that it is as well top-down as bottom-up, and that you can go up and down between both levels and bring both levels into connection.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And
Thank you.
We are going on tomorrow on Saturday, Turn On Talk.
To discuss, yeah.
Yes, to discuss the plans.
Thank you.